failure isn't a bad thing. And I think society and I think the world just wants it easy, but that's where the real learning happens, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of times I'll put an athlete into a situation, and let's say it was that TrackMan situation I was talking about with the path, and they're doing multiple games, right? So they're doing like a serial training where they're doing a putting task, a short game task, and then they're working on their technique. When that athlete doesn't get their desired numbers, they have a choice. And when they hit that shot, they can be mad, but if they're mad so that the next time they come through, they make sure they change those numbers, then I've done my job. So I don't necessarily have a rule like you, although I'm definitely I definitely took that down. Like I'm gonna steal that. But what I do is I want to make sure that the athlete still has this passion and still has this desire to make the change. Whether that change is just an outcome of making a putt or that change is their technical change, their the challenge point needs to be optimal. If it's too easy, they're losing. If it's too hard, they're also losing.
All right, guys, that was my buddy, Zach Parker, one of the young, talented coaches in the golf industry right now. We are coming to you with this discussion to break down the woo-woo that is mental performance and motor performance and skill development, all the things that you really have to put together in the elite training programs. So kick back, relax, grab your popcorn and your favorite beverage. This is an awesome, awesome talk. And stay tuned because hopefully you'll learn something that you can implement into your own training programs. Hope you guys enjoy. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with friends that are looking to improve in their golf game. All right, guys, welcome to Against the Grain. Tonight, I got a special guest, a buddy of mine, Zach Parker. I've known Zach for almost a decade, dude. Actually, I was looking to see when I went down to Bishopsgate to see you, and it was in 2015. So shortly after I launched the Low Zone stuff at the first PGA show, and I followed you a little bit up until I disappeared into the woods, and I found out you got a new book out right here is Zach's book, Golf Practice, How to Practice Golf and Take Your Game to the Course. Now, I don't have this yet, but I'm sure it's phenomenal because I've got Ian's book and Matthew Cook's book. And oops, see, this is what I was warning you about, bro.
Better graphics than the cover of the book, man. That looks good.
Let's see here. There we go. All right, we're back. So tell us a little bit about yourself, man. And I was already warning Zach about this. It's been a couple months since I've been on here, and I'm a caveman when it comes to technology. Like I can throw some edits together and stuff, but this on-the-fly interview thing is not my forte. So jump in, buddy. Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Yeah, we'll roll with it, man. Well, first off, I'm just honored to be on the pod and to help the listeners learn a little bit. I think we're going to have a fun little chat here about practice. To give a background on me, I've been coaching elite junior golfers for almost 15 years now. And before that, I was at your typical country club as a director of instruction, trying to help players get better. Started to realize that I enjoyed coaching the elite player, not because it was more rewarding. I think because it was more challenging, right? And what I love through this whole journey of coaching for the past 20 years is when a player challenges me. And I think that's what hopefully your listeners are going to do tonight. They're not just going to listen to what we say, but they're going to go and do the research and try and poke holes in what we talk about. Because in order to move the industry forward, I think we need to not just be followers or sheep, as you said when you were stuck there in the woods. But I think we really need people to start to think outside the box and look at what
Hey, speaking of
actually
which, look at that. That's my new shirt,
nah,
man. You like that?
I love that,
That's
man.
up
I
on
love that.
that's up on the site now. So thank you for that. I appreciate you throwing me that bone right there. I'll knock that one out of the park while we're here.
No problem, man. But I guess I'm not one to sit here and kind of talk about myself, but I've had a little bit of success, but a lot of the success that I've had is a result of players challenging me, and then me leaving that practice session trying to figure out how to get better. And over these past 20 years, I've dove really deep into the way that we learn, the way the environment affects my effectiveness as a coach. And I would say my philosophy or my beliefs are rooted um, in trying to figure out a way to have players actually have skill transfer.
Right.
And I know people hear, oh, we have to transfer skill, but I'm in the results business.
Right.
I'm a golf coach, and if players don't get better, I don't get to keep working with them. So hopefully, some of the stuff we talk about tonight, people can put into their own lesson books, they can put into their own academies, or they can put into their own game, depending on if it's a coach or a player listening. Um, the sciences of how to learn and how to practice don't just apply to elite players. Obviously, I'm going to be able to
Right.
speak about it from an elite side, but I also do coach the recreational golfer at times, and I don't change my philosophy.
Yeah, see, that's what's going to be beautiful about this conversation is that you and I run parallel thinking, wavelengths in terms of how to train and the types of things we want to implement. But I have fashioned my training program to target the beginner, right? Or the unteachable. I love the
Yeah,
unteachable, right? Okay. So the
yeah,
guy that when you go and you get your lesson and you're doing nothing but video and you're working on technical, and you don't have an understanding of the concepts of why you're working on that technical, that makes it very difficult to transfer skill, right? Conversely, if we're doing the skill development stuff, right, and the motor development is secondary to it, right? It always keeps things in context so that we're learning, right? It's always got that. We've always got that cognitive function going on. That prefrontal cortex is going nuts while we're training, so that when we actually get into competition, right, we've seen that type of environment in our training, and we can transfer it into that competitive scenario. So again, my background is more adaptive golf and retirees. That was my deal in Florida. When I got down to Florida, junior golf was not that big in North Florida, at least where I was in St. Augustine. It is now. Dan Carraher is up there in where is he at? Southampton, up in North St. Augustine, and he's killing it. But so these principles work across the spectrum. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about somebody who has never held a golf club, okay, or who has played for 20 years and is enjoying their retirement and is just trying to shave a few strokes off. We can implement these ideas into their practice so that they can actually see the benefit of what they're working on, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think you opened up with the book that Ian and I wrote with obviously Matthew and Eric Eigel. And the whole purpose of the book was to try and take all of the information out there, all of the research, um, all of that science, and put it in a digestible format for coaches and
Right.
players. And the way that it is challenging for me, I can't imagine how challenging it is for other people to read some of these research papers. So our goal with the book was to take all of that information and try and distill it down into this practical way. So the book is really about how to add spacing, variability, and challenge to your practice.
Sure.
And at the root of that, I would say it's about interleaving skills.
Okay. Now that's a perfect segue into what I saw the other day. Let's try this screen share thing again. Let me put my caveman hat back on.
You got it, bro.
I'm going to screen share to this. This, for those who don't know or don't put content out, it's pretty tough to put out complete content in 90-second short format. This little clip right here is chock full of gold nuggets. And this is something we're going to chat on tonight, because there is a huge misnomer that if you're talking about motor development and neuroscience and sports psychology that you're only talking about the mental aspects of the game. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because it's the mental aspects of the game that drive the physical. Okay, so we're going to play this real quick. We're going to give you your highlight moment.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret.
Okay.
You know what really pisses me off when people think about me and I say it's about how you practice.
Yeah.
It's about using spacing, variability, and challenge to improve your swing. People think, oh, that guy doesn't believe in technique. That couldn't be farther from the truth. I'm obsessed with technique. I'm so obsessed with technique that I actually want you to train in an environment that allows you to change your technique.
Yeah.
I want you to have lasting change, because the way that you practice is repetition without repetition. It's about practicing the entire skill, not just practicing one movement in an isolated fashion, right? Yeah, I guess I'll give you a little snippet, right? Like, here's the reason why I put it out is, and I put like top secret, because the secret is I get so pissed off when people tell me, like, I say, hey, you know what you need to do? You need to add spacing, variability, and challenge to your practice. And then someone says, oh man, this guy just wants to come at it from the mental side. He doesn't care about technique. That couldn't be farther from the truth, okay? The reality is I care so much about technique that I want the player to train in an environment where they actually learn the skill, and then they have that learning be what's called lasting learning, so that it sticks with them, right? A lot of times when we practice something, or when I first got into coaching, I made the mistake. So I'm not sitting here on my high horse trying to pretend that I didn't make these mistakes. But I used to practice technique. And then I would say, hey, you know what? You've learned that technique. Let's go test it in a performance environment. And then when they either were successful or most of the time they struggled, I'd say, you know what? It's probably a mental thing. So let's now work on the mental game. And I was working in these like 3 silos. And then by divine intervention, or whatever you want to say, I was lucky enough to meet some really smart people and get to hang out with Dr. Anders Ericsson and Tim Lee and Rob Gray and all these giants, right? And then I became friends with Ian Highfield, and we became obsessed, right? Drinking rum on my back porch, talking about how we're going to revolutionize the way people practice. But what we were really starting to understand is 70, 80 years ago, well, in 1920, Bernstein's hammer study came out about variability, right? That's 100 years ago. Like, what are we doing, right? So I realized that you can't just talk about learning one skill in isolation. What you have to do is you have to train the same way that you're going to play. And we're in a sport where no 2 shots are the same, whether that's club, lie, wind, contextual interference, whatever it might be, but no 2 shots are the same. Yet people come and they pay a lot of money to take a lesson from me, and they want to hit the same shot for 2 hours. It drives me nuts. So what I say is, hey, we have to train the way that we're going to be able to re-access that feeling. And probably the reason why you reached out is I said something in that video, which was like, the real secret to practice is repetition without repetition.
Right.
And what I mean by that is variability is at the root of everything. Okay. I'm not as smart as Bernstein was when he was figuring out why the Soviets the iron workers were more successful than another, right? And they thought it was guys just had more practice. But what they learned is certain guys had a better understanding of how to move that instrument. That's my job. That's your job. Our job is to figure out how to get an athlete to move. And so that video, thanks for sharing it. And I'm sure we'll figure out a way to play the audio. But basically what I'm saying is stop practicing your technique until it's good enough to then put it in performance. And then when you're not getting the result that you want in that performance, think that you need a mental intervention. Start to figure out how to train in an environment where you're working on technique, performance, mental, and the entire skill of playing golf at once.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So most of my study is obviously variability, right? And Adam Young was actually on my last podcast right before my daughter was born. And he left
Sick.
us
Great
off.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah, great dude. Smart guy too, man. He's been on this front line of this same battle too. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think you and I actually met through the golf teaching professionals forum, right? And you
Yep.
get involved in these debates, and it always gets down to biomechanics and stuff like that. That's just the root of what guys know. You know what I mean? And like you were saying, and we talked about this in the pre-call. There's studies that have been quantified and refined and re-refined for the last 50, 60 years, you know. And now we've got the neural imagery that we can put up there and see what's really going on live, in real time and during these studies. So it's something that instructors really need to dive into for sure. And you spoke about environment there. And that's one of the things that we were talking about. I try and do with my games is that when you're playing these games, it constantly forces you to adapt to the environment, just like you would throughout the course of your round. You're talking about how the typical practice session for your average golfer is, let me go grab 100 balls at my local driving range, right? And there's 4 flags out there, right? There's one at maybe they've got one at 50, maybe there's one at 100, but more than likely there's a red stick at 100, a white one at 150, a blue at 200, and maybe, if they're lucky, a yellow at 250, right? So you got 4 targets that you can hit at that are all pretty much in line with each other. So you're never changing your perspective over the mat, right? You're never seeing a different angle. You're consistently pounding same shot over and over and over again. And what you're really doing is a disservice to your practice, right? Because you're talking about the variability that we need to actually function on the golf course. If it's absent in our practice, how are we going to transfer anything into that 18-hole environment where the name of the game is how well can you adapt? I mean,
Agree. I agree. I think adaptability is something that coaches and players worry about, because when you train in an environment where you're working on not just one isolated skill, but you're working on multiple skills in an interleague fashion, it gets chaotic. It gets messy.
yeah,
But that's when the learning happens, right?
right.
Like, we both have young kids, right? And if I'm
Mhm.
asking my daughter, hey, what's 17 times 3? She's going to think about it for a minute, and she might think wrong. She might not. She might have to write it down. But she says, okay, it's 51. If I keep asking her what 17 times 3 is, what 17 times 3, what 17 times 3, how many times in a row do I ask her that before she looks at me like I'm crazy?
Right.
Like, she's going to say, Dad, why are you asking me the same question? My hope is that golf coaches understand the goal isn't to just have them learn it once and then do it over and over again, because they're just repeating something that they kind of have this false sense of competency. Then they leave your practice session and they're like, oh man, why could I hit it when I was with George or Zach and I can't hit it when I'm not there? I must need to come back. My job, your job, any coach's job is to employ the athlete to become their own best coach.
You are
And the
absolutely
only
right.
way, the only way you can do that is if you teach them that the goal of golf practice isn't to learn something and then keep it. The goal of golf practice is to learn something, to lose it, and then recall it, because that's when you're actually getting better. So that math problem that I said 17 times 3, I might ask my daughter Liliana that. And then I might say, hey, what's the capital of Tennessee? And then she thinks about it. And then I
Right.
might say, hey, who was the 5th president? And then I might say, what are the colors in the color wheel? And then I might say, what's 17 times 3?
Right.
And while she still has that memory of knowing that we solved that answer, there is a moment when I say what 17 times 3, she didn't know that question was coming. She has to think about it. She might even doubt
Right.
if I gave her the right answer the last time, and she solves it again. And that's the beauty of what you do. That's the beauty of what I do. It's not just one game in isolation, and it's not, hey, come to this practice session and we're going to play games. It's come to this practice session and get better because the game is going to teach you what you need to do to get better.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm all about a spectrum of skill, just like you're talking about it. Let's say that we're rather than golf, we're doing American Ninja Warrior, right? And our way to prep to go into American Ninja Warrior was just a run. That's all we did.
Yep.
We just did fast sprints all day long. And we thought we were going to
Yep.
go on American Ninja Warrior and be able to jump and balance and do all those things, control our center of gravity, maybe hang on some monkey bars. No, it's not going to happen. And the same thing's going on in golf. Just because you're swinging a club every time does not mean it's the same skill. A chip is very much different from a pitch, even though they might only be separated by the matter of a few yards. You've got to understand how that tool works and how your body controls that tool and be able to switch it up again within that spectrum. That's where functional knowledge comes in. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen, you know, high level players that are very, very good at what they do. They can go out and they can smack it around a golf course all day long. And you ask them when they hit a bad one, well, what do you think happened there? And they have no concept, right? No concept of the impact variable that was actually at play, right? They've just developed this visualization and their motor ability to control and put it right into what they're visualizing. But they don't really understand what causes maybe a ball to deviate a little left to right or a little right to left, and
Yeah.
it's introducing, I think you wanted to talk about context a little bit. And I'm assuming that's in terms of what types of training we implement. Well, if I don't have the concepts or the variables that are at play and I'm training to do something, well, what am I really gaining? I
Yeah. I
might.
think I think that's so true. And Ian Highfield, that I work closely with all our elite players, he talks about the way that Top Gun revolutionized the way that the U.S. military was training. Right
Right.
before, they were training in simulators and they were training in a safe environment, and then there was this crazy idea that we were actually going to put real weapons in real planes and go up in the air and practice. And they lost people in training, but the amount of people that they saved when it mattered is astronomical. So I think that's sometimes the root of this real discussion, is that players want to feel safe in practice. They want to feel like they're getting better because they're seeing some sort of success in practice. And then they think, oh, I got it. Let me go to the course. They get punched in the face. And then they revert back to the way their practice was. Oh, you know what? I just need that swing guy. Or, I just need to get on the TrackMan to make sure that my dynamic loft is right, without really understanding what they need to do to change that variable. They become reliant on the feedback, whether that's video from a coach or that's the coach's word or that's anything from biofeedback or whatever. But the reality is we saved military members and people that are willing to die for our country because we were willing to actually create an environment where we were okay if they died in practice. And if we could create that mindset in golf, I think we're actually going to start to see players get better. And the reality is, if you watch the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, DP World Tour, what we're talking about, the coaches at the highest level, they're already doing. It's pretty rare to walk up and down the range at a professional event and go, wow, that guy's so much better.
Right.
But then you get on the course and you go, wow, that guy is so
Right.
much better. And they always say it's hard to be a younger guy. I think now when you look, the reason why a lot of these younger guys are having success, they came through programs, whether that was at the collegiate level or that was at the junior level or that was at the club level, where their coaches were already making practice harder than when they were actually performing. And that's why we're seeing these guys
Right.
excel early on in their careers.
Yeah, Michael Michaelides was the first interview I ever did for this podcast, and that was one of the things he talked about. You see on the college level, man, is, and it was actually one of the things that he separated the men from the women. In terms of what you'll see is the women are typically much more technical work, because they need to be that much more technically crisp to be able to separate themselves. Whereas you see a lot more creative play from the guys. They're playing games, right? They're hitting all the funky shots. Maybe it's a flop with a 6-iron, or they're getting right up next to their golf bag and hitting a flop over it, or trying to hit it under something and roll it out a certain. I mean, the creative exploration, right? That's where I want my students to end up, right? You were saying it earlier. The better you are at your job, the less they need to lean on you, right? Like,
For
I'm
sure.
totally with you on that. And guided exploration. You know what I mean? Like, I want to kind of guide you down this road. I want to help you set these parameters here that you can play within, but I'm not going to hold your hand. You're going to have to walk down this road. I'll just be there as a bumper to kind of keep you on the tracks. You know what I mean? And I
For
think
sure.
that, again, you can't do that if you don't have the functional knowledge. There's a lot of complicated ideas floating around in the golf world. So if you can't simplify this stuff so where somebody can understand it, retain it, that's the biggest thing, is can they retain the knowledge when you give it to them? Then it becomes something they can build skill on. So
For
now,
sure.
before I forgot, I wanted to share this abstract of this one thing, because we were talking about variability earlier. And once again, we'll rely on my oh shoot, where is this thing? Maybe I won't share it. I'm gonna have to try and find that. That's a good article. Here we go, right there. All right, be patient with me, Zach. I'm trying my
No,
best.
it's all good, man.
I'm trying my bestest here. There we go. All right, I'm going to screen share that. And here we go. And I'll read this for everybody, but this is an article from 1995 right here. Variability and development of skilled actions. Okay. Now, if you don't hear golf industry when we read through this second sentence right here, like, I don't know what to tell you. Consistency and invariance in movements have been seen as the essential features of motor skill development. This emphasis on the stabilization of action has led to the neglect of processes whereby skills are modified and reorganized into new and more complex acts. That is the process of adaptation. All right, right. So we're out here dying for consistency every single day on the tee, man. Every student that comes to you and wants to start playing golf, until they're aware of this stuff, they want consistency, right? And what we're doing when we're developing consistency is counterintuitive to this adaptation, right? The way our brain works, the more we send a signal through our brain to control our motor movement, the stronger that signal gets. And the stronger that signal gets, the harder it is to interfere with it and actually alter or adapt, right?
Amen
So,
to that.
I mean, now this is kind of where I'm at here is the variability, and I mentioned it with Adam, is the micro variability, the minutia of the things, and I use the results, right, as the constraint for our quantifiable feedback. That's basically what I do. My products are the feedback, right? And then we're working on the process on the other end of it. So right here, 2 experiments on the acquisition of skilled action by children are reported. A sequential coincident timing task which permitted an operational distinction between the macro structure and microstructure of the task was used. The results support the argument that with development, the action becomes increasingly consistent at the macrostructure level, and that this is achieved by maintaining variability at the microstructure level. Okay, so my thing now is I'm trying to frame this skill development thing as art, right? As I'm coming back and I'm launching my products, I want people to understand that they're developing what is essentially the athletic art, right, of mankind. Think about
Yep.
the way an artist paints a canvas, man. They got to visualize. Each stroke is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, they all come together into this beautiful piece. And that's kind of how we have to develop. We have to develop the the variability in creation, right? That's the art side of it, is the creation, and then the science side of it is the after effect, right? That's the trying to reverse engineer it. So we see our numbers on TrackMan and we say, oh, okay, well, this must have happened. Let me look at this still shot of a dynamic movement, implement this change, and hopefully we'll see some numbers change on the screen. Well, maybe, or maybe we'll create the functional knowledge like you're talking about, put the player in an environment where they've got to apply this functional knowledge. And then we place constraints in there where we're just turning the golf course or the putting green into an obstacle course that forces them, right, to either get it or suffer, right? That's the big
Yeah,
thing.
and I think you're absolutely right. I love that study, and I think that the real understanding that people have to know is if they come to a lesson with me, or they come to a lesson with you, or they come to a lesson with their local pro, if you want to improve your, let's just use any variable on TrackMan, but let's say spin and path, just to keep it easy, because that's probably two things that everyone understands, right? And you want to change those things. I am going to make sure that we collect the data in an environment that is very similar to the golf course. And then I'm going to see, do you have the ability to then repeat that skill? So if you currently have a negative path and the spin's too high, right, with your driver, let's now give you a drill where you have a station where you're working on that movement, right? Whether we put a mini band around your legs or we teach you wrist angles or whatever it is in that technical area where you're working, say 3, 4, 5 balls at a time. Then I would move you to a game. Say it's a putting task, and they have a putting task where they do 2 or 3 putts maximum. Then I would say, if you've achieved that putting task, good. Come back to the TrackMan, and we'll see if you still have that skill. If they don't achieve the task on the putting green, I would say now you have to go to the short game area. You have to get an up and down or a pitch inside of specific proximity. And when you do that, you earn the right to come back to the TrackMan station. Yes, it makes the time longer between those reps. But actually, what I'm collecting is the real information. What's going to happen from hole number 1, tee shot. The reality is you might not hit another driver until hole 4.
Right.
So why am I going to have you hit 20 drivers in a row and
Oh,
then say, oh, look at you. You've improved your path. Then we go putting and I come back and the guy's a mess
right.
again. Why not teach them, hey, let's add spacing in there so you actually do that same thing that I said earlier, which is repetition without repetition, where you create lasting learning, because the art of practice is to not just learn the skill and groove it. The art of practice is to learn the skill, lose it, and then have to recall it.
Right. Right. And now this might sound difficult because I know how you guys and game like training do it, right? You guys have your different stations set up. And it sounds like it can be difficult to create these types of spacing things, but you can do it very simply, just like holding them out maybe one ball every 20 seconds. If all you've got is one range station and all you can do is hit balls, not a different target every shot, right? Different club or different yardage every shot. Timeline constraints where they can only hit one ball a minute. You know, so there are simple ways that you can still pull some of these benefits out, right?
Yeah,
The next thing,
there's only excuses. Like, if I'm honest, like, I'm
yeah,
gonna pontificate for a minute. Like, that just bothers me. Okay. If you couldn't do anything but hit balls, hit 10 balls in 10 minutes. Like,
yeah,
just find a way to slow down time. And look, I don't the more I learn, the more I believe that slow motion swings aren't the answer, okay? Because putting a club in position and making it look good at a certain speed, and then you ask them to hit a driver and it's all over the place. So let's do it at the speed that you want them to play at. Let's try and hit the yardage that you want to hit. But if you really want to have this amazing before and after, and you say, look how great I am, then one of those should be on the golf course, because no one
yeah,
cares if their before and after is on the range. So I guess there's no reason why someone can't do this. And if they say their practice facility doesn't do it and they can't do it, then have them hit a ball and turn and then hit a pitch to the far end of the range or hit a chip inside of the den caddy or whatever it might be. But the reality is spacing forces the athlete to have to slow down the number of reps, right? Variability is what we have in training. Variability is what I have in training, but not what some athletes have in training. And the irony is, my guys, because they have this variability in practice, their technique doesn't vary on the course. But players that groove it on the course can have two-way misses like all the time because they haven't practiced it.
Yeah. Well, you brought up the before and afters too. And I think that's a really important point to make is like, we know now that the aesthetics of the golf swing are not everything, right? Like we're seeing from 3D motion capture now that it's matchups and sequential timing of how everything's coming together and delivering impact, right? So just because you might think you've achieved something by establishing a certain look down the line or face on or whatever doesn't mean that you're going to improve your performance necessarily. And the form, in fact, should follow the function, right? That's one of the things that drives me nuts about these commentators on TV is, oh, he got a little high on that one. And what do you know what the player was trying to do with the ball? You know what I mean? Chances are, if he got a little higher, finished a little higher or something, he's probably trying to hit a little soft landing cut in there. Maybe he's trying to shorten that club a half a club or something, You don't know the idea behind the player. And if we had the ability to really know what they were doing when we were framing those shots, I think that would kind of put it into perspective for the average viewer who is always chasing, oh, I want to swing it like Adam Scott, or I want to swing it like Rory. Well, Rory's swinging it like Rory, and Adam Scott is swinging it like Adam Scott. And yeah, there's probably some positives in there that we can take away and try and implement into your swing. But if you're swinging the way that your body is designed to be swung, right? Chances are it's going to be as unique as you are, right? Like in subtlety, at least. Okay, right.
For sure.
Again, within a spectrum, there's always that spectrum. So we got a couple minutes left, man. Challenge is one of the things that you brought up. Now we're going to talk a little deeper in our fireside portion of this. My rule is, and this is kind of counterintuitive again to most coaches, they want their students to succeed. I want my students to fail. I just want them to fail within reason. And my rule for challenges is 2/3 failure. Okay. I want to set that bar so that it's almost out of reach, but not quite. And that wherever we go and whatever challenge we're working on, for every 2 failures they have, they're able to see that success, right? It fights the burnout, but it also, again, it establishes the challenge at what I would consider an appropriate level. So what do you got? Any insights into that?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? Like, so if one of the skills that you're working on is to teach grit and resiliency, then maybe that challenge point is a little bit higher and you bring an athlete to the point where they're not sure they want to continue. Yeah. Or they look at you and they tell you the rules of this game don't make sense. This is unfair. And then there's a learning opportunity. But failure isn't a bad thing. And I think society and I think the world just wants it easy, but that's where the real learning happens, right? Yeah. Like a lot of times I'll put an athlete into a situation, and let's say it was that TrackMan situation I was talking about with the path, and they're doing multiple games, right? So they're doing like a serial training where they're doing a putting task, a short game task, and then they're working on their technique. When that athlete doesn't get their desired numbers, they have a choice. And when they hit that shot, they can be mad. But if they're mad so that the next time they come through, they make sure they change those numbers, then I've done my job. So I don't necessarily have a rule like you, although I'm definitely I definitely took that down. Like I'm gonna steal that. But what I do is I want to make sure that the athlete still has this passion and still has this desire to make the change. Whether that change is just an outcome of making a putt or that change is their technical change, the challenge point needs to be optimal. If it's too easy, they're losing. If it's too hard, they're also losing. Unless the skill that you want to teach them that day is how to persevere. And there are definitely times when people come and watch me, they think that it's too difficult. But I'm probably challenging them on more of that mental fortitude, more on that perseverance. But if I'm working on a technical skill, I probably wouldn't set the parameter in the TrackMan, or I wouldn't have set the parameter in biofeedback to one that I didn't think was attainable. Now, if I put a window in biofeedback that's narrow, but I know they can do it, and they don't do it, all I say to them is why. And their answer usually is, my focus was on something internal, right? So if a player is having that left path and their focus is on how to move their body, but they're not thinking about the start line and thinking about having that ball start to the right with an open face to hit that draw, then they're losing.
All right, guys, we got cut off there right at the end. We're gonna pick up where we left off with challenge and internal focus. So stay tuned. Part 2 of that chat is going to be up next week. We hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation. Listen to this a couple times, because where we pick up again with challenge and internal focus, that is it gets even better. So I hope you enjoyed. Again, like, subscribe, and share with your buddies who are looking to get better at golf. Stop beating balls and start implementing the things that are really going to make a difference on your scorecard. As always, thank you guys for checking this podcast out. Hope you enjoyed the chat, and we'll see you in the next one.